past few days, late-night talk show host Jimmy Kimmel was suspended after accusing Donald Trump and his allies of capitalizing on Kirk's death and using it to score political points. Our final conversation, recorded before Kimmel was taken off air by his network, is with 3 young Christian women who are dedicated supporters of Charlie Kirk. We talked about the sackings and about Kirk's views more generally. Savannah Stone, Naomi Speakman, and Jordan Goodman.
What drew me to Turning Point USA was because of how outspoken they were. A lot of people like to separate church and state, but as Christians, we know that we have to put God first in everything. And Charlie was not afraid to do that. And I feel like that's another way that he equipped so many young people. People need to know you are Christian by your behavior, not just your words. So if you're out here and you're at these marches and you think you're marching for civil rights, and yet people are cursing God and they're advocating for killing children in the womb and they're anti-freedom and
may not like
they're destroying people's property.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. You may not like those views, but don't they have the same right that you have under free speech to express them? Jordan?
Oh, they absolutely have the same right, and I have the same right to call it what it is. A lot of this behavior is demonic. So I have that right and they have that right. The problem is they try to take away my right for saying that.
Yeah, I'll add to that. This is Savannah. Look, everybody is protected by the First Amendment. They have the right to free speech. But when speech becomes violence and speech becomes celebrating the murder of someone, I think we need to have some boundaries around exactly what free speech is allowed. And the other thing is...
Can I interrupt you there? What are those boundaries? So if somebody didn't like Charlie Kirk and said we didn't like his views, and we've seen people lose their jobs, haven't we, for saying things about him, do you think that's correct? Or what should happen to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been working behind the scenes to get people fired from their jobs because I have a social media following. I've had people send in submissions. I actually think that that's the least thing that they deserve. We can't exist in society with people who celebrate murder, because if you celebrate murder, you're fully capable of committing murder.
Well, you know? Is it celebrating, or some of the people who've lost their jobs have just criticized the views that he held and they didn't like those views? And I'm confused by what free speech means. And isn't free speech free to say anything? Can Charlie Kirk say himself people should be allowed to say outrageous things? That was one of his most famous quotes, wasn't it, Savannah?
There's a line, though. So the people that are disagreeing with him politically, those people aren't getting fired. The people that are getting fired are the ones who are literally saying the most heinous things about his death, or making t-shirts of him getting shot in the neck and making fun of it, or dancing on TikTok and saying, I'm so glad that he was shot in front of his wife and children. That's where we have to have a line. You can disagree with him politically.
Can I give you an example here? Here's somebody who lost their job. This is what he said: I truly don't care if you think it's insensitive or poor timing to decline to respect an evil man who died. They're not celebrating his murder, they just say we can't respect him. What do you think should happen to that person?
Again, I think that they should lose their job. That is a form of celebrating. That is a form of saying, I'm glad this man was murdered.
What about you, Naomi, on this particular issue?
I don't necessarily think people should lose their jobs for political beliefs. Obviously, it's different when they're declaring there should be some sort of violent act, but I believe that we're going against what Charlie Kirk stood for when we're saying, well, you're going to lose your job because you said this about Charlie Kirk and his family. That's rescinding free speech, so we have to toe the line between making sure people aren't insurrecting violence while also ensuring that we don't infringe on free speech like Charlie Kirk stood for.
Hey, it's Jordan. I really want to cut in right here, actually. So, sorry to you, Naomi, but I am fully in agreement with what Savannah is saying. We are not restricting free speech. This is the natural consequences of society when you spew out your hate, right? You are allowed to say what you want to say, and just like the leftists always say, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences. We're not going to create legislation and make laws against what you can say, but society has the right to ostracize you right? Employers don't have to let you represent them when you're sitting here celebrating death of a father, of a husband, of a Christian man who was violently killed in front of his entire family. So no, I don't believe that we should make laws against it. I think we should actually make free speech more free, right? I need to expose who these people are in my community, in my society, that are so okay with saying this stuff, and you will face the consequences.
I wonder, though, if you want to try and build a country where people are willing to listen to each other, if you're going to make it difficult for people to express views you don't like, how is America going to do that?
Again, a political view is completely different from saying, I am so happy that a father, husband, and Christian man died and was shot in front of his family.
Okay,
we have to
but
differentiate that.
Yeah, we do differentiate between that, but there are a lot of people who feel at the moment that they've said things about Charlie Kirk. They didn't like his views, particularly when it came to black people, if it came to guns, and that when they're expressing those views, they are also getting a lot of hate as well for what they're saying. And how do you bring the US together when it looks from the outside now to be so divided? And Charlie Kirk, whether you liked him or not, what he always wanted, wasn't it, was dialogue?
Well, from what I'm seeing, the people that are calling Charlie Kirk racist and homophobic and misogynistic, they listen to maybe a 7-second clip on Instagram or TikTok of him and not an entire debate. And that's the problem with our culture, is truthfully, it's a lot of young people. It's a lot of people who scroll on TikTok all day. So they have TikTok brain where they can't even listen to a full debate. They don't have the attention span to do that. And then the mainstream media sits here and calls people like Charlie Kirk and conservative people racist, fascist, Hitler. And so when you constantly demonize a public figure and you throw these words around like they have no meaning, and then people are watching that mainstream media and they're also seeing these clips that are made for clickbait on TikTok, and they're watching that every single day and they're consuming that, of course they're going to start to believe it. And then,
yeah.
Well, I mean, if they believe that someone actually is a Nazi or a misogynist, then of course they're going to be like, yeah, we want him dead because he's all those different things.
Savannah Stone in conversation with fellow Charlie Kirk supporters Naomi Speakman and Jordan Goodman.